Hey everyone, PokeGold back with another video now. For Pokemon, I am a collector and I'm also a grader who likes to leverage data to see, what cards make sense. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down Scarlet and Violet base set in terms of, what makes sense to grade with PSA. Now, Scarlet and Violet is considered to be one of the less hypes in the Scarlet and Violet era. And what I'm going to do in this video is really take a deep dive look at the statistics behind some of the illustration rares and the ultra rares, and really seeing kind of what makes sense to grade with PSA. What I did was I have this Google Sheets. I have some of the cards that I believe can be worth grading, as you can see noted down here by the set, the card name, the card number, and I have information in terms of how much it will cost to buy the card, how much it will roughly cost to grade with PSA at their cheapest service, and I have some other information and data points that I will showcase later on. It goes through, what's your percent chance to get a PSA 10 in a certain card, really seeing kind of how difficult it is to grade a card, as well as, what's your ROI and expected ROI specifically. So if you grade a card, it comes back a PSA 9, it comes back a PSA 10, what's that average? If you grade 100 of them, what's the average that you're going to get, grade by grade, card by card? So I have a total of, 16 cards that I believe and thought, hey, these have decently high amount of cards graded with PSA. Let's do a review and really see what makes sense to grade and what doesn't make sense to grade. And I think the results may surprise a couple people. So again, I start from lowest number of card in terms of the set, and that being Slowpoke. And I have kind of the set list here. So again, starting with the illustration rares, going with the Slowpoke art. Slowpoke. It's a funny name. Slowpoke art. And I have a couple other ones, I think. Slowpoke, Ralts, Curlia, Riolu. What else did I do? We'll get into it. And if you want to see the arts, you can look them up. A lot of great arts here, but again, people find this set a bit more underwhelming. So I'm going to go hide. I'm going to go first show, what's your percent chance of getting a PSA 10 in these cards? And these cards are very difficult to grade, at least on the illustration rare side. So I have 5 total illustration rares here, with the Slowpoke, the Drowsy, the Ralts, the Curlia, the Riolu, and I'm going to do the average. It's about 20% chance. I have an average chance of getting a PSA 10. The Ralts is the most difficult, 15%, which is crazy, because if you think about, Evolving Skies, the Umbreon VMAX, it's kind of the marquee card of this era. I think that card has around like a 70 to 80% PSA 10 rate. So going from that all the way down to 15 just shows how incredibly difficult it is to grade these illustration rares. The print quality in terms of English print quality for these set, it's terrible. It's not good, and it makes these cards extremely difficult to grade. We get into, I think these are considered ultra rares. I'm going to go up to PSA and see kind of, ultra rares. The ultra rares and the special illustration rares have better print quality, as well as the hyper rares. You're seeing the average of these being around 35 to 50%, 47%. So these are much, much easier to grade and attain a PSA 10. And you may think, okay, this is an easier card to grade. You can see the prices here. It's in a more expensive card, Miriam being the most expensive at $40 from the set. I should grade these cards. And if you do that, without looking at any data points, you may be going in the wrong direction. Now, what I want to do next is just quickly show how much how much roughly is a PSA 10 and PSA 9 worth. And you can see some very interesting results. And this is taking eBay auctions and buy nows, and I'm only looking at actual sold cards. So not what's listed, but what are these cards actually selling for? And it's interesting, but it makes sense. The Ralts, it's the toughest to grade in a PSA 10, and they have the total amount of PSA 10s available worldwide that PSA is graded as a 10, and I'll get to that in a bit. But 15% PSA 10 rate, These Ralts cards in a PSA 10 go for $250. That's insane. That's $230, $232 to be exact, more than the card itself cost. If you go to a PSA 9, it's only $30. So you're seeing a huge drop off, $250 to $30. Essentially, buy the card for $18, you pay $20, 15% chance you're getting $250 worth of value. Other $85, you're getting a 9 or lower. I don't take into consideration anything under a 9, just because I don't feel like it at the moment, and these calculations are accurate enough for me. But it's interesting, the Ralts and the Curlia, two popular Pokemon, 250 and 150. The Gardevoir is the next highest at 130. But you can see some of these illustration rares, the Slowpoke and Drowsy and the Riolu, almost go for each $80 to $90. But again, you see that steep drop off from PSA 10 to PSA 9 price. And you see that for the other cards as well, for the ultra rares and the special illustration rares or arts. There's that steep drop off. Now I'm going to go just minimize this grading and shipping costs. Again, a flat $20 I'm saying to grade all these. And we can see the profit of a PSA 9 and profit of a PSA 10. It's interesting again. You know, a lot of these cards, I think all of them actually, if you get a 9 or lower, you're losing money. You're only making money if you're getting a 10. Thankfully, almost all of these cards, you'll make money if you get a 10. Now there's an exception, Rhydon and Crydon, $1 if you get a 10. And what I do with this calculation is I'm taking the sold price of a PSA 10, I'm multiplying it by 0.8 essentially, and then I'm subtracting it from the overall cost of the card. So what this does is it kind of simulates what it would be like if you sold a card on eBay, you packed it, you provided free shipping, so you're paying for shipping, you're paying for packaging supplies. If you calculate gas in your calculations for expenses, I don't, because it's a bit too much for me. But that 20% kind of covers you. It's a high estimate, but I like to estimate high in terms of expenses because you don't want to lowball yourself in terms of estimating overall expenses, because then you may have, revenue and profits that are lower than expected. In this case with 20%, if you're only doing a 17% in terms of kind of fees and expenses, then that's an extra 3%. With all that being said, PSA 10, Ralts are making $160. Rhydon, Crydon, you're making $1. So huge difference there. There's some in between, from that, $1 to, 28 to 54 to 87. There's a lot of variance in this set. I'm going to go into kind of the estimated profit per card, which is very interesting here. What I will do here is I will sort my computer. Oh, did it for me. Nice. Sort highest to lowest. So you can see kind of what will you, by my calculations, make if you grade 100 cards is how I do it. So this is really taking 100 cards you grade. We're saying in this case for Gardevoir, you're grading 52 of them as a 10. You're grading 48 of them as a 9. Now, obviously, if you want to do 8s and 7s and below, calculation will probably dip. But for these intended purposes, most of these modern cards are getting a 10 or a 9. So that's what I'm using here. 100 cards, 52 10, 48 9. What is the average profit you'll make on these cards, which is about $20. And this is saying that, for every, pretty much 50-50. So you grade 2 cards, you'll get 154. You get one, you lose $18. It's an average of like 36, I believe. You divide that by 2, you get 18. Of course, this is not 50%, it's 52%, so it's higher than 18. But you get the point. So this is showing kind of how much can you expect to, you'll make per card, regardless of if you get a 10 or a 9. If you get by 100, you're saying you're following statistical averages of PSA grading, 52 and 48, $20 a card. Ralts, 15%, even though it has that very high price of a PSA 10 of $250, you're making $160 from this. Still, that means 85% are getting a 9 or lower. For this calculation, 85 are getting a 9, and 15 are getting a 10. and that brings you to an average of $12. Now, this is really interesting to me, and this really helps me kind of guide what makes sense to grade and what doesn't make sense to grade, as well as what's going to be difficult to find a good card to grade. And what I mean by that is if you go on eBay, you search up the vaults, you try to find a good condition card, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very difficult. And there's a reason why, because the print quality is bad, and that's why only 15% of cards are getting a 10. Versus if you're looking on eBay, you're looking for a Gardevoir that's mint, PSA 10 worthy, it's going to be much easier. So the time spent, trying to find a vault, maybe 3 to 4 times as longer as trying to find a Gardevoir. So Gardevoir, it's going to be easier to find a 10 worthy card on eBay or wherever you're looking, and it's going to get you and net you more on a per card basis. Now, however, go to ROI, you'll see the vaults here, the curlier, actually, by my own stats. I just refreshed this today. 93% ROI. This is because we go back to the card cost. Vault's $18, curlier $13. It's cheaper to get the curlier. You're making 87 profit with 10. You're only losing $10 and a 9. For some reason, the curlier is 7% easier to grade in the PSA 10. Don't know why. Doesn't make sense to me. That's the fact, and that's the true numbers and statistics that behind it. So from an ROI standpoint, you're getting the most bang for your buck for curlier. And I'll just filter here and sort by here. Curlier is giving you the best ROI. Vault in second, Gardevoir in third. The Miraidon, actually, this special illustration art gives you okay ROI. 30% in anything is pretty decent, especially when you compare it to the stock market, 10% average. 31% is pretty decent. But if you're grading a card, Scarlet and Violet, I'm only grading these 3. Nothing else is worth it. In fact, other than these top 5 cards, Curlier, Vault, Gardevoir, Miraidon, everything else on average is losing you money. On average. Now, there's a chance that you can grade a Drowsy and it gets a 10. 25% chance to get a 10 and you make $30. Sure, but it's difficult. I do have the total pop, so how many cards have been graded, how many cards have been graded 10, how many cards are graded 9. That's how I get the percent chance of 10. I just do a simple calculation of column P divided by column O. But this is how I choose what cards to grade, how I choose what cards to prospect. If this is interesting to anyone, let me know in the comments below. If there's any set or series that anyone wants me to review, or if there's any cards you want me to review, drop it in the comments. I'm happy to make any videos on any cards. I'm large into collecting Pokemon, of course, but I'm also really interested in the data analytics behind it and kind of what makes sense to grade. That's all I have today, so hope you all have a good rest of your day, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you all in the next video.